Welcome everyone to our July 2026 Bayou Culture Gathering. We're very happy to have all of you with us today. If you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, please go ahead and do so, and we are going to get started. So first, I'd like to introduce to all of you the management team that brings this program together for all of you. My name's Jonathan Foray, and I'm the Executive Director of the South Louisiana Wetlands Discovery Center. Dr. Rachel Doherty, who's over at the Center for Louisiana Studies at ULL, and she's also here representing the Louisiana Folklore Society. We have Maria Zarang, who is the director for the Louisiana Folklife program over at the Louisiana Division of the Arts, and also Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is at the Center for Bayou Studies at Nicholas State University. The staff of our program, Maida Owens, is our senior program consultant, and Dr. Shauna Walton is our project coordinator. The reason why we bring this program to all of you is that we believe that there is great reason to include culture in planning, especially as it relates to coastal land loss issues. And so each month we bring to you a program that sort of highlights this for everyone. We'd also like to say thank you to our funders. We would like to say thanks to the National Endowment for the Arts, the M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, the Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Division of the Arts, and of course, the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. I'd now like to pass this over to Maria to talk a little bit about this month's Artist Spotlight.
Okay, this month I'm doing something a little different. At the Louisiana Folklife program, we launched a new radio show. It's monthly, and I'll just be talking to just people who are kind of in like the folk life world, either artists or community members or people, folklorists like myself. And it is in partnership with KRVS. I should have put their logo on here, just realizing. But so KRVS is the radio station out of Lafayette and the Acadiana region. They also have a huge online following. So it is
It's
every
at UL Lafayette. Sorry, I have to say that.
wait.
It's the university radio station too. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, what did I say? Did I just say
It's
Lafayette?
in Lafayette, but yeah, it
Oh,
is.
okay. Yeah,
It
yeah.
is a
You
community station, but it is the university station too.
Okay, thanks. Um, anyway, yeah, it's the third full weekend of every month that it is live, oh, not live, but like, just kind of on the radio station if you're in the area, or if you're like doing a live stream online. So it's Saturdays at 7 a.m. for the early birds, and then Sundays at 3 p.m. for the regular people. And yeah, so you can catch it then if you're in Lafayette or in one of the kind of areas of service on the radio, or you can catch it online. But then also, I think Maida's gonna put a link. Oh, Maida did put a link in the chat. If you go on that link, you can listen to the episodes at any time. They'll just be on there, forever, kind of archived on that site right there. So if you don't catch them when they air, that's fine. You can just kind of catch them after. But my first two guests were Karina Roca. Karina is an amazing artist. She is a blacksmith apprentice. She's been apprenticing under Master Blacksmith Daryl Reeves from the Seventh Ward in New Orleans. She's been working with him for 6 years. She's also a historic preservationist. She works at a Preservation Resource Center in New Orleans, and we had a great conversation. It was really awesome. And then the one that we just aired last weekend is with Shane Rasmussen, who directs the Louisiana Folklife Center in Natchitoches at Northwestern State University. That one was cool because I've been knowing Shane for a long time, and I got to learn a lot about him that I didn't know. But also, like, it's just rare that folklorists can just kind of talk shop like this, one on one. So I thought this was a good episode to kind of talk about folklore and kind of what is it, and just kind of for our listeners to learn more about it from two folklorists. So check those out. And then we'll have more coming up for you in August and September. So that's it for me. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So for today's agenda, we are going to have a presentation by Playdoh Kolo and Misha Mayeur. We're going to allow a few questions for them, and then we're going to ask them our question about reclaiming the human connection. We'll have a few working group updates, any announcements from our group, and then from 1 to 1:30, we invite everyone to stick around for an informal discussion. So, I am very excited to introduce to all of you both Playdoh Kolo and Misha Mayeur, who will talk to us about The Little Shrimp and the Terrible Noise, an environmental justice giant puppet show. Thank you both, Playdoh and Misha, for being with us today.
The Little Shrimp and the Terrible Noise, produced by Sunrise New Orleans, written by String and Shadow, starring Plato and myself and the puppet show players, and in collaboration with Habitat Recovery Project. Came about from the puppet protest in 2024. Sunrise New Orleans produced a puppet show which they performed at the America's Energy Summit to support the public's understanding of the liquefied natural gas build out on the Gulf Coast. It featured prominent Gulf Coast activists and paraded in downtown New Orleans. At that same protest, fishermen from Cameron Parish showed up with their boats to protest LNG. They subsequently faced harassment from the NOPD and ultimately fled before they even saw the puppet show. So tragically, the solidarity that 30 of them had come over to speak their piece to the energy executives in New Orleans, and stand with Jane Fonda and Sunrise and everyone who had collected for this giant moment, was dashed. And they had driven 4 hours to come over and drove 4 hours to leave, because the NOPD said that they would take their boats. And that was so tragic. And it was a compounding tragedy on top of what they were already experiencing. Cameron and Plaquemines Parish are experiencing these massive buildouts of liquefied natural gas export facilities that are beyond the scale that many of us can even comprehend unless we see them. These whole town takeovers have pushed townsfolk and generational Louisiana fishing villages to breaking points. Many have left, and those who are still there are feeling hopeless and unheard. And this is something that we wrote 2 years ago, and it's only gotten more extreme. Um, the tankers that are along Louisiana's coastline are taking up spaces where shrimping boats used to dock. Now, in the nesting grounds, there are these giant tankers that pull 6 foot wakes as they go up and down the ship channel. Where there were docks, there are giant cement facilities. They're not only pushed out of their homes and the boat docks, but they're also seeing up to an 85% catch loss when they can dock out into these spaces. And so the organization that I work with is called Habitat Recovery Project. It's based in Southwest Louisiana, and it helped to organize this fisherman protest in 2024. Since 2023, HRP has worked to amplify fisher voices that have been describing the harm that they are seeing, experiencing, and living. We have been working to honor their theories and their solutions. With the cruel injustice that we saw at the protest meant to honor frontline communities, Sunrise vowed a second puppet show to right this ship. So HRP and Sunrise brought over a band of puppeteers to Cameron to soak up the stories from the fishermen so that they could tell the tale. Fishermen in Cameron say you don't want to tap on the bottom of the boat because it will scare the fish. With giant tankers flowing in and out of the channel, the fisher folk thought that the noise from the ships might be scaring the shrimp. Thus, our story was born. Puppeteers met with 3 fishers' families over the course of the weekend, listening to them describe their experiences of Cameron past and Cameron present. They recorded fishermen's narratives and over the next month and a half wrote and produced a show. The Little Shrimp and the Terrible Noise follows the life of a shrimp born in the Calcasieu River and raised in the Gulf of Mexico. One day, the shrimp and his whole family are rocked by the terrible noise, and the shrimp is forced to go on a hero's journey to save his home and his family. From a porpoise to a giant turtle to a great egret, the shrimp gathers wisdom and friendship on his quests. He finally finds himself on the shoulders of a fisherman who answers the question, "What is that terrible noise?" which leads him to unexpected places, and he must call on his new friends for help. Will he be successful? The puppets that we made and used were cardboard flats. The show begins with cardboard flats and fabric backdrops featuring local flora and fauna. Animals met along the way are painted cardboard with metal fixtures and are expressions of key animals in the ecosystems of Southwest Louisiana. Um, the paper mache and fabric are larger puppets. The egret, which is met by the little shrimp and later hosts the shadow puppetry, is a mix of fabric and painted paper mache. The egret is managed by four puppeteers, and it made an appearance in French Quarter Fest this year, along with LSD Clown System. So it got to have a day off. The puppets are also shadow puppets. So narrative aspects of the story use shadow puppetry. The shrimp and the dolphins use shadow to denote the radio show that encapsulates the whole show. And when the fisherman tells his tale to the audience, a wave of shadow puppetry washes over the crowd, which is a really beautiful piece of the show. Larger pieces use foam. The hero and his family in our story are composed of foam. Later is revealed that the villains in the story are also foam puppets, which are carved with a turkey carver and spray painted. The giant mouth is fabric and spray paint, and uh, it that is the LNG executive and the plant that gobbles up the coastline. And finally, our giant lantern puppet. During the show, the little shrimp meets a giant turtle who is a lantern puppet maneuvered by three people, which takes four to lift. The body is supported by backpacks with bamboo worn on the back by two puppeteers who also move the legs and the mouth. After its illustrious debut at Climate Culture at the Music Box Village, the Little Shrimp performed at Earth Day in Lake Charles, the Louisiana Shrimp Festival at the Broadside, and the 12th annual New Orleans Giant Puppet Festival in the Marigny Opera House. The Little Shrimp has reached over 1,000 people in its seven performances across New Orleans and Lake Charles. Who knows what the future holds for Benoit the Shrimp and the Cajun Convoy?
All right. Hi, folks. It's Playdoh here. Going to keep it going with some information about the process of building this show. So we've got this giant turtle in our show, which is one of the epic features in the story, and we're going to walk you through a little bit of the process and the many hands and coordination needed to make that work. So this was a puppet that was facilitated by Andrew Kim from Thingamajig Theater as a master puppet maker with a group of New Orleans artists. And I'm going to show some photos from other Andrew Kim workshops because we didn't get so much documentation of that, but this is the same kind of process here with making a giant puppet head, building an armature there and covering it in recycled materials to build up a form, and then covering that in clay, sculpting out the form all smooth and nice, and then that gets covered in a thin layer of plastic. And that plastic becomes a pattern similar to in sewing, where different shapes are cut out, and then those are going to be laid out on a sheet. In this case, we're using Warbla, which is a thermoplastic that can be really lightweight, waterproof, and light can shine through really easily. So that gets all cut out into these shapes that are then put together, melded together on the form again using a heat gun. And voila, you've got a giant puppet head. And then that is attached to this large body armature there with lightweight wood and PVC draped with fabric. And in the end, we get something like this, a beautiful puppet ready for performances or parades. Um, and yeah, so what's the deal with puppets? You might be wondering by now, what does this art form have to do with our lives here in Louisiana? So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of puppets and sort of the performance and ritual of using animated objects, which has been around for thousands of years. So we go back to ancient Egypt here. We've got illustration of an altar boat that folks would have paraded around the streets in a procession, animating that object as a shared symbol in this festival. And then if we jump forward just 3,000 years or so, we get not too dissimilarly another altar boat in the Rex Parade, Mardi Gras in New Orleans. And you can decide for yourself how dissimilar or similar this might be from things 3,000 years ago. But yeah, then we can trace the origins of giant puppets too through medieval Europe and the Catholic celebrations dating back all the way to the 1200s, the 13th century. Um, with these traditions still going on. You can see on the right there in Barcelona a giant processional puppet, and if you see the little feet at the bottom, there's a person in there making this almost two-story puppet move through the streets. And we're going to jump forward now to the 19th century and look at bread and puppet. So this is really where we start to talk about American giant puppetry and how it relates to social issues, with their work starting back in the 1960s. And you can see these next images here. We've got some documentation of their early anti-war protests with depicting nuns suffering under the Vietnam War. And shot of contemporary bread and puppet. They're still going strong today and tour their shows. And that diaspora has really extended out internationally and across the country. And Andrew Kim, who helped to facilitate that giant puppet build of the turtle, he comes out of that lineage too. Yeah, and so we'll talk a bit about my own work in puppetry and how that relates back to this project. Giant puppets are often accompanied by visual storytelling aids that we call contastorias, these large banners like the one in this show here, that I created with some artists in Detroit around similar issues to what we're facing here in New Orleans and what the folks in Cameron are experiencing with LNG. This was a show talking about the Detroit Marathon Refinery plant. And a little more recent example, this is from this summer. I've been helping out with a giant puppet company in North Carolina that works on environmental issues, both locally and nationally connected. And they put together this beautiful Condastoria show with giant puppets. You can see the backdrop Condastoria in the background there, of illustrating a story about food systems and food autonomy for communities of color to you know deepen and change their relationships to the earth and to their food source. And this is another shot of that Condastoria, that visual storytelling showing people's relationship with their food. And then just touching briefly on some other modes of puppetry. You don't need to make anything giant to be doing puppets. This is a show that was at the New Orleans Giant Puppet Festival last year called Riparion, where I took objects found from the Mississippi River, washed up on the banks, and used that material itself in the telling of the story of the river and the place we call the Batcher, those floodplains on the river's banks, using the water itself as a part of that show, and speaking with some Bachelor residents. And see in the next slide here, Macon Fry, who is the author of a great book on the Bachelor settlements called They Called Us River Rats, with a bell there that he donated to the show, something he found washed up on the shore there that gets incorporated into the show and the story of that place. And on the right, we have, excuse me, someone using just some found materials, an oyster shell, and some plastic scraps to make a found object puppet, just from what they found on the streets or walking along the river. And my work with giant puppets in New Orleans, it extends to these large gatherings, such as the New Orleans Giant Puppet Festival, which we just had our 12th year this past April. And that always includes a giant puppet parade that seems to grow every year in scale. So these are just some shots of people's puppets from the community out and about on the streets of New Orleans. And that's our presentation for today. Thanks for listening to us nerd out on some puppetry and the story of the fisherman here.
Thank you so much for sharing y'all's work with us. We do have a little bit of time for a few questions from the audience. And so while folks are thinking about their question, well, I don't even have to give people
Oh
been
yeah.
thinking about their questions. No, no, it's good. I have some too coming up. So, but Maria, what's your question?
Yeah, I got a lot of questions, but I could save a couple of them for after. I guess my first question is for like the fishermen and communities in Cameron Parish and like the surrounding area, kind of what has been like their response to Little Shrimp and the Terrible Noise?
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to put into this show or in this slide deck. Um, and I can drop a link later, but the voice who we interviewed for the show has seen it 3 times now. Solomon Jr. And he goes through and explains what has happened in the town of Cameron to the shrimp in the show and is animated by shadow puppetry in that. And so we were able to bring this to Lake Charles to show a group of 10 fishermen came to that show. And they enjoyed it. They didn't understand it while it was being produced. They were like, why puppets? What is the deal with puppets? Like that slide with Play-Doh. But Solomon told me after Shrimp Fest, when we did the last production in October and he saw it, Solomon said, the puppet show will live on. We may not be talking about this forever, but the impact of the puppet show, I get it now. Like this thing will outlast. So he like it kind of clicked in why the importance of art form in advocacy and the importance of storytelling was for this experience, if you will.
Maria, did you have another question?
Oh yeah. Um, okay. So yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, that example alone is like, I guess this is why, kind of we do the BCC, like why is culture, art, storytelling so important? This stuff kind of like lives on. But okay, I went to the New Orleans Giant Puppet Festival, this last one. That was my first one. I used to juggle, so I'm kind of familiar with European clowning traditions. But I wasn't familiar with puppetry, just, I mean, besides, you had the Kermit the Frog thing, like the Muppets and, your regular kind of childhood puppets. And ever since then, I have been obsessed with puppetry, and I just think it's so awesome. And I actually looked up the Bread and Puppet Theater, and I think the what y'all did, Misha kind of setting up the issues, and then Plato saying like, why puppets? Because there is this tradition within American puppetry to talk about social justice and political issues. And so I wanted to ask, like, were Bread and Puppet Theater in Vermont, were they kind of the start of that? Did they kind of usher that in?
Yeah, that is kind of one of the origins of kind of this explosion of giant puppetry. And for for people, puppetry might feel like a way distant thing. I guess for me, being deeply involved in it, I've met people who have done giant puppet parades or have giant puppets in so many cities or towns around the country. And a lot of them trace that back to Bread and Puppet. The folks in North Carolina who I mentioned, paper hand puppets who make really beautiful large scale puppets. They had apprenticed on the farm in Vermont there. I know a lot of other theaters have. I spent some time there as well. So it is definitely like a sort of um yeah, one of the roots there. There's other things that we could point to. Tony Sarge in the early 1900s, he created these giant balloon puppets for the Macy's Day Parade. Um, and those are really fun. If you look up some photos of those, he's got Felix the cat and these other cartoon characters just massive against these skyscrapers in New York. But Bread and Puppet was really doing it in this accessible folk way, using your cheapest recycled salvaged materials, and that is really yeah, taken off for a lot of people. It's that as an accessible means of doing epic community art.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, Maria, if you have other questions, if you can hold
Oh
them,
yeah,
we'll
no,
go.
I'll
What? No, 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 you're great.
I'll hold that.
We'll go to Gary and then to Rachel and then Maida. If there are any questions in the chat that you like to share with us after Rachel, so let's go in that order.
Yeah, I just wanted to applaud y'all's activity in Southwest Louisiana. I grew up going to Holly Beach for hunting and crabbing and stuff, and I've seen what's going on down there, and it's very scary. And we often talk about the loss of culture because of coastal land loss more, but there is an obvious loss of heritage and culture happening kind of for a different reason down there. It's industry, and that's scary. But I also had a question about y'all's awesome puppets. You know, to me it brings magic into I don't know into view whenever you have a big puppet like that. And I was wondering, I couldn't tell from Plato's portion if y'all use sound, if your puppets have voices, or if they're silent.
So, Play-Doh, I would say voices 80% of the show, maybe 75. And then we have a really good soundtrack that plays along with it that he also manages. That would take up another 10. And I would say that I'm up in there for two voices of two puppets as well. But
Yeah.
the sound effects really, the sound effects and the fact that Play-Doh can do seven different voices in one show really takes it to another level.
It's a
Well,
really fun show for me for that reason too. I don't
yeah.
often get to do that.
Well, that's cool. Good luck with keeping that up. Thanks.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Hey guys, thank y'all so much. Actually, Jonathan, the questions or the comments that I had ended up being taken up by people in the chat. So I'll do this part because I was having the same thoughts, and also to kind of bounce off of what Maria said about exposure to like European street theater, juggling, clowning, or even puppetry through carnival traditions in Louisiana, which, as Plato mentioned in his presentation of the history of puppetry, a lot of us in Louisiana will see this in carnival processions sometimes. It's a little more concentrated in New Orleans. But at other festivals, other parades during holidays or times of year, sometimes we see puppetry being incorporated into parades. So we have in the chat, Tracy Laird asked this question, which was the same one I was thinking of. Are there resources you recommend for people who want to learn how to create giant puppets? But then another participant, Amy Stillman, mentioned an organization in Philadelphia called Spiral Q, which is a puppetry group, and they work with communities for years to address justice concerns through puppetry. So she was wondering if you network with them. So not to get too lost or confused, but can we kind of ask the two-part question, like how can communities in Louisiana work with either you or other groups, any networks you know of, to have puppetry workshops to address justice, but then also kind of draw on these European or even other traditions that may already exist around in our cultures? Any recommendations for us?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm first of all just happy to chat with anyone about making puppets and how to do that. I love to nerd out about it. So my contact info is there, and you feel free to get in touch. I offer workshops on making puppets and of different scales, giant puppets included. There's some great resources for that as well. I know there's some pretty simple, like illustrative resources that Bread and Puppet has, and some other theaters have that I could share with anyone for just some source materials to you know quick, easy techniques. One of the techniques that we use in New Orleans a lot, that kind of comes out more of the like float building and that work is using this contact cement and cardboard to create things really fast, and basically using this contact cement on cardboard makes it kind of operate like Velcro, and it's a really fun process to build with, quick and easy. So there's a friend of mine who uh, every Mardi Gras season has open build days where people can learn that method to make monsters. And yeah, that's a lot of fun. Another thing that I can drop a link to. There's also a workshop series that happens in the lead up to the New Orleans Giant Puppet Festival where people come together to build giant puppets. But yeah, it's something I'm happy to offer to uh, communities throughout the state, to kind of show people some of these techniques, and how to do that. And these traditions really, I know you were mentioning, and we show in the slide some of the traditions out of Catholicism and medieval Europe. There's giant puppets throughout the world too that I didn't get to touch on. That was kind of the most direct through line. But there's, epic, many story tall effigy puppets in India, and very different, elaborate giant puppetry traditions in many parts of Africa, like the Ivory Coast, and in the northwestern part of Africa too. So yeah, it's something we could we could go into a lot of detail on.
Maida,
Oh,
did you?
and
Oh,
Spiral Q is definitely someone, trying to remember who I know is connected with that, but yeah, they're an awesome organization.
Maida, did you see anything else in the chat before we move on?
Brooks has a great question about what have you learned about fighting the damaging effects of the oil industry in our communities, given the fact that they are such an economic driver in our communities,
Mm.
There's
our
a
economy.
so in this work, and if you follow For a Better Bayou, James Hyatt is been chewing on this for years, having come out of working in oil and gas himself. But basically, a major gripe is the um, IPAC, the tax incentives where they don't have to pay property taxes in order to move in, and then the exporting of LNG specifically um, is not creating oil and gas for the space, and then the jobs that come in are construction jobs that are taken by like migrant workers who move through. So there's not many jobs created for the community, and they don't pay property taxes, so the money is not going back into the communities as well. So there's a misunderstanding happening about the economic impact of oil and gas on Louisiana with these tax incentives, because though there's a time limit on them, they just need to expand, like plan an expansion on their facility, and then that clock restarts. So there's this game that's being played where they may never have to pay their billions in taxes. With the amount that's being extracted out of Louisiana right now, it should look like Dubai. We are one of the poorest states in the nation. So I can talk about it a lot, but it's a rock and a hard place for Louisiana. We got to stop um, making it so that renewables can't move in. We like need to be able to allow solar farms and wind farms to come in to diversify our workforce.
Thank you.
We'll have time for one more question, and then we'll ask for Misha and Playdoh to respond to our question. But then I also ask if you please stick around because we'll have 30 minutes to continue the conversation. But Maria, you had your hand up, and this will be the last question for right now. So Kathy, please hang tight because we'll get to you at 1 o'clock if you don't mind. Thank
Okay,
you.
I just wanted to show y'all this.
I
I
can't see.
bought a bunch of oh, what, okay. I bought a bunch of oh, well, I guess y'all can't see, but I bought a bunch of the zines from Bread and Puppet Press. And so I bought this one, 68 Ways to Make Really Big Puppets, and it's just a pattern book. So I just wanted to show y'all because it was at my office. But on Bread and Puppets website, I bought a bunch of these, and they're really cool and accessible, and they're, small and cheap. So, uh,
Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank
Hmm.
you. All right. And so we'd like to continue with asking the question that has become the theme for us for this year. And that's to ask both Misha and Plato, what's one strategy that we can use to reclaim human connection? This was inspired by the thought that, social media platforms and things like that sort of isolate people from each other. And so, Plato, if you'll go first and then Misha, if you'll follow, what's a strategy that we can use to reclaim human connection?
Yeah. Well, um, this work, I think it has that kind of question and that drive kind of um, baked into what it is. I think creating these puppets, especially as you saw with the process of these giant forms, it requires a lot of teamwork and coordination. It requires a lot of hands physically, uh, putting something together, and um, the act of making something, especially something that couldn't be done on your own or couldn't be done by a computer, couldn't be done by AI. It bonds people together, and you know, both in the act of doing this, and in the performance, for the audience to see this, something that puppetry does. You see the people behind it. It's not like a super high tech animated film or something, right? It's you see all the mechanisms behind everything, right? And I think there's something that sort of disarming to people about that people feel, in one sense, like let in on the story there, or let in on the behind the scenes, and it gives a certain intimacy in that. um and there's also something about puppetry that, you know it's uh playing with objects like this is so sort of natural to us as young kids, that it brings out a sort of playfulness in people, and the universality of these puppets, that they um, are often not, excuse me, such a they're not as specific as an actor. We have to put our own ideas, our own imagination onto them to run with the idea and fully bring them to life. So there's that universality to it, that everyone is giving meaning to this thing that we're all agreeing is alive. That I think helps to connect us more deeply. And that can happen also alongside the specificity of these really individual stories, these stories like the one we're telling, that are very rooted in a place, Cameron, Louisiana, and these real people, and their real life stories, that is happening in tandem alongside this more universal um, imagery and storytelling.
Thank you for that. Misha?
I'm going to surprise myself. I want to say humor. Um, is the way that I would reclaim human connection. I think it's the most disarming way to touch another person pretty immediately is through a laugh, a shared laugh. And I always want to give praise to the sacred clown, where if you are um, if you're looking to disarm like a Three Stooges or a Groucho Marx or just being in a clown position, acting foolishly, being in a fool position, even like those words really um, disarm people and they get to a space where whatever you are is like no longer a threat. It's like, do I got something in my teeth? And people are like, ah, you're a human. I love that. And so it really helps people. Uh, so I'm here for like an open mic, a gong show. I'm here for your weird talents. I'm here for people to act silly. Yeah. Taking the seriousness down helps a lot with human connection. And something I've seen with these uh, the something I've seen with spending a lot of time with the fishermen is the storytelling aspect of telling the stories of the wild things that they've seen or the silly things that they've done, really allows for them to continue on in like the face of the things that are happening in their life and to share that baseline human connection.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. We have a little bit of housekeeping before we get to 1 o'clock, where we will be able to share more with both Playdoh and Misha and ask them some more questions and continue the discussion. So, for this is our BCC group schedules. We've got the French language preservation group, the Protecting Collections group, culture and coastal planning, preparing receiving communities. So if you're interested in any of those topics, please just let us know and we will connect you with the right folks. We'd also like to invite all of you to our next gathering, which will be on Friday, August 21st at noon. We will have David Hubble with us, who's with I'm from Chauvin, and in Chauvin we say Maliton. Some people say Merleton. So it depends, I guess, on what side of I-10 you were on. So I'm gonna say maliton.org, how restoring and preserving a cherished Louisiana heirloom is rebuilding community, culture, and connection. So you can join us to find out if the correct pronunciation is Maliton or Merleton on Friday, August 21st. We hope to see you there. So again, thank you all for being with us today. This concludes the formal part of our presentation today. We hope to see you again next month. Thanks so much for being with us.